Yeah.
That's I see. Where's the yeah, 6. 140.
I'll offer that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Any discussion on any? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 2, temporary on sale liquor license for the New Ulm Area Catholic Schools Incorporated, and that's for January 24th, 2020.
I'll offer the motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item 3.1, report from the city engineer regarding the proposed 2020 capital improvement program. Mr. Kaler.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is, as you mentioned, the city engineer's report on the proposed 2020 capital improvement plan. It's a statutory requirement that the engineer provide this to the city council prior to going into public hearings and ordering plans and specs and things of that nature. So behind the request for council action form, I have a listing that kind of summarizes the recommended improvements, and behind that is a 31-page report that I put together. I won't go into that in great detail, but you can certainly ask questions. So I guess I'll start on the plan listing right behind the request for council action form, and Assistant City Engineer Stadheim is going to bring up a little map and kind of give you some bearing here, hopefully. So the first group of work is down on Front Street. It's the included in the 2020 utility street and alley improvement. It's basically an extension or a continuation of this year's project, which was from 7th to 13th South. This would be from 3rd South to 7th South. It includes reconstruction of all the underground utilities, storm sewer extension, ADA sidewalk improvements, as well as roadway reconstruction. That's kind of a area that everyone is familiar with. The roadway's in very poor condition. The underground utilities are old and undersized and really needs to be reconstructed. The second area is 2nd North Street from State to Franklin, We have one block of water main and sanitary sewer reconstruction. We've got some undersized utilities for a block, and then 2 blocks of roadway reconstruction along with any ADA improvements at the corner ped ramps that we need to do. The third area is Palmer Avenue out by Highway 14, roundabout by Menards to 150 feet south. In that location, we are going to modify the roundabout to provide a southern access leg and about 150 feet of water main, sanitary sewer, and roadway improvements to accommodate or to serve the National Guard Armory and FMS site. That's part of our agreement with the National Guard to provide that access and utilities to their lot line. The next one is Front Street from First North to Third North Street. This is basically in front of the Firmenich manufacturing facility. We've got a 6-inch, I believe 6-inch water main there that doesn't provide adequate fire flow protection. We need to increase that to 10-inch. I think we can probably accomplish that with a no-dig situation. We'll either do some pipe bursting or directional drilling in that location. The next one is a storm water treatment pond up in Oak Bluffs 4th Edition. That's up on North Highland Avenue, about 8th North Street. We've got a stormwater pond that's basically filled in over the last 10, 15 years and needs to be restored to its original contours and functionality. The next one is concrete sidewalk and ADA improvements, and we put those in this project to fulfill the areas that the 2020 surface reconstruction project affects. If you do any kind of reconstruction, you need to conform to these federal regulations. So it's just easier for us to have a contractor do that. The street department is not able to handle sidewalk improvements. The last one is Oak Street right away from Oak Street to Raymond Drive. It's kind of an unusual situation. There's about 200 feet of gravel surface at that location. It was meant to be a temporary connection to Raymond Drive. Eventually 12th North Street, which is already platted, will be constructed, but the developer has not moved ahead with that. So just to make it a better entrance area, we could, pave that for about 11 or 12,000. So I included that in there. The next one is what I'm calling the 2020 MSAS project. This is a project technically led by Brown County. Center Street from Broadway to Camel's Back is a county state aid route. We've got a cost share arrangement on this particular. It's going to be a mill and overlay. And again, we need to do the ADA improvements at the sidewalk corners. And we're working with the county to replace that traffic signal at Payne Street on Center. That's well over 40 years old, and can you imagine what kind of electronics are in that system that needs to be replaced. So we're looking at that. Oh, I should have mentioned the USA project. The estimated cost is up below about $4.1 million. And then on the Center Street project, 50% of the cost is about $486,000. I'm estimating, and we can use our state aid dollars for that, so it won't be a local levy. Then we got the 2020 surface reconstruction project. These are typically every year the street department does 12 blocks of roadways where we don't have to do any underground work or major reconstruction. So we've got 8th North Street from Garden to Franklin is 3 blocks. 2nd South from Front of Valley is 1 block. 7th South from Washington and Railroad Tracks is approximately 6 blocks. 9th South from Front of Valley is a block. And Washington Street from 16th to 17th North is a block. So that adds up to 12. Estimated cost is about $471,000 for that. And we got the 2020 airport project. We've got some pavement reconstruction scheduled up at the T-hangars. We're looking at about $300,000 total cost for that. There's a combination of state and federal funding that will fund probably close to 95% of that cost. So we've got some areas that just really need to be redone. The next one is 2020 Boundary Street Railroad Crossing. There's some federal money available. This was originally scheduled for 2021, but they wanted to move it up to 2020. The city will be on the hook for 10% of that cost of that 300,000. It'd be signals and gates. Probably in the following year, we'll do the surface crossing itself, but I think it'll be a good project. There has been some accidents at that location. So the total cost and all that estimated at just under 5.7 million. Then, in the report itself, yes, I already did the project summary listing, section 2, page 5. I don't know if you want, how deep you want to get into this, but it has the list of funding sources and projected bonding need. We're projecting over that 5.6 million, we're going to have to bond about 2 million. I worked with Nicole, the finance director, to make sure we uncovered all the funding we could find. I think that'll work nicely with, you need some space to bond for the Renew project. I'm not sure what that cap is, but we tried to keep it at about 2 million, so you had some room. So that's probably good news as far as funding. Section 6 on page 10 is a discussion on special benefit. You need to have that consistent and in the report as well. Section 7 on page 12 supplies an estimated special amount for each property. That's also required in the report and needs to be available in future public hearings. The total amount, especially that we're estimating for special assessments, is about 410,000 of that 5.6 million, but it works out to about 20% of the actual bonding cost of the 2 million. So we have to assess at least 20%, so we're right in the right ballpark. So that's kind of my report. Unless you have any specific questions or not, that's what we're recommending for next year. It's not quite as large as the 2019 listing, which was just under 10 million, but like I said, we've got plenty of work to do, and we need to keep the bonding down as well.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody have any questions for Steve?
I'd like just a comment on page 6, is the history of looking at failed miles of roads. And, you know, in 2010, we had 30 miles in our city of failed roads, and we're down in 2020, be projected to be a little less than 10.5 miles. And that was certainly a request from our council to reduce that number. And it's a complaint from our citizens of not having some of our roads up to par. So I think the compliments to our city staff and engineer and making that a priority to reduce that number. A question I have is where is that right about where most cities are at that are functioning fairly well, or is that kind of where we want to be at? And there's always got to be a portion of failed, marginal,
Yeah.
adequate.
Mr. President, I guess I can't comment about other cities, but I know when we started our payment management system, that was kind of the proportions that we wanted. It was almost backwards from what we had
Yeah,
today.
I agree.
And well, thanks to the city council, who has been progressive in allowing us these reconstruction programs, and actually borrowing the money to do them. You know, that's what's happened. We've gone from 31 miles of fail down to 10 in 11 years. So.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I just have a question. At some point, I'll be asked to look at contracts for the Renew project at Herman Park, and I'm looking at the proposal for the MSAS on Center Street. Do you have any idea what the county's timing is with that? Because I'm sure that'll, if they're going to do Herman Park in 2020, that
Yep.
could be difficult.
It's a 2020 project. It's a mill and overlays, so basically you can do that under traffic. The only probably unusual situations, we'll have to do a four-way stop control while they replace the signal. So as far as access, shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none? Accept the motion to adopt the report?
I'll move it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Steve.
Welcome.
Item 3.2, variance request of Dale Bushard.
I add that the planning commission recommended approval at the meeting. We had some discussions about it. I think John's got a few words to add on it.
So we had a request by a property owner located at 101 South Broadway. That currently that property's that site has an old gas station that had been remodeled and a new business was constructed there. The applicant is proposing to construct a 34 by 62 addition to the east side of that existing building, and that addition he would like to have 5 feet 2 inches from the property line, that south property line. Currently, the existing building is 7 foot 2 inches from that line, so this would be, his request is for 2 feet closer. As far as the layout of the property, it is a slightly unusual layout. The property is L-shaped, and where this addition is being requested for variance is actually only 50 feet wide. And with the setback requirements from those two side property lines of 10 feet, he would like to keep that 10-foot setback from the north property line and then move it closer to that south property line to 5 feet 2 inches. And I guess for a little bit more background, the property to the south, the Havelmeyer building, was granted a variance in 1976 when it was Joe's Campers to be 5 feet from that north. That it would be their north property line. The applicant is here, and if you have any questions, we would answer them. The applicant could as well.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions, concerns? Seeing none?
Just the only concern that was, I had, when we were dealing with this at the planning commission is that the footings were already in and, and as right now the walls are poured, and I was wondering, talk to staff a little bit, whether it was a staff issue or if it was a permitting issue or, getting the communication for moving forward. We're not setting a precedence within the community for future projects.
I'm going to piggyback on Councilor Mack's comment on that. I also did check with the building official on that issue. I mean, normally I would probably be the only one voting no because of being the past building official, but I do see the criteria that was met. I mean, he was informed you might be tearing this back out if the planning commission and city council says no. But after reading through the staff recommendation, I don't have an issue with it.
And I guess I didn't have an issue with it at the zoning meeting because, they own the N2 lots, and so now you have 3 properties, to the south. The Havenmeyers were fine with it, for the variance, so.
Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion approving it?
I'll move it with the conditions stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item 3.3, Werboro Enterprises LLP conditional use permit application.
Dave Schnober,
Schnober,
Community
yep.
Development Director. The Planning Commission considered this request at their November 21st meeting, and they unanimously recommended approval of it with conditions. The street address of this property is 1414 West Ridge Road. Formerly, the Hunter's Den was located at this site. Currently, there's a 20,400 square foot building there, and the applicant is proposing to use 10,000 square feet of that area for storage purposes. In the report, that Planning Commission report in your agenda packet, there is listed a recommendation for approval, and 6 different reasons are cited. I'll go through those real quickly. First is that the request complies with the conditions required for the granting of a conditional use permit. Secondly, the proposed use is of the same general character as certain permitted uses in the B2 zoning district. And we have identified what those similar uses what those uses would be. Third, the City Council at its August 1st, 2019 meeting approved the issuance of a conditional use permit to Tony Golden on behalf of Wind Shuttle Golden Enterprises Incorporated and the Farmers and Merchants State Bank of Springfield to locate a storage facility at that location. That ownership change never took place, and so that request lapsed. Number 4, adjoining development will not be adversely impacted by this use, and more specific information is provided on that. Number 5, storage buildings are generally less intense uses than most B2 land uses. And number 6, the city has previously allowed storage facilities in the B2 zoning district. As far as conditions, there are 6 of those. The first is that the applicant will pay the cost to record the permit with the Brown County Recorder's Office. Number 2, storage uses will only take place within the existing building. 3, no loading dock will be constructed on the property without further approval of the city. 4 hours of operation will generally be between 8 a.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. on a daily basis. 5, no semi-trailers will be used for storage activities. And 6, no hazardous materials will be stored in the building. That would conclude the report.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody have any questions?
No.
That being said, I'm going to offer a motion to recommend approval with conditions. The applicant of Brett Wilberg on behalf of Wilberg Enterprises LLP for conditional use permit to allow an existing building located on property zoned B2 Service Business District and legally described as Outlot A, Block 3, Valley Heights addition to be used for storage purposes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to offer the resolution. Waived reading. Any more discussion?
Mr.
Yeah,
President,
no?
it says resolution on
It says resolution.
I don't know what it should be, so just thought I'd mention that.
I think a resolution.
It should be a resolution.
All right, we'll leave it as a resolution. Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Fisher? Yes. Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Dave. Item 3.4, amend section 9.10, or 9 and 10, B2 Service Business District, City of New Ulm, code. City code.
Okay. This matter was also considered by the Planning Commission at their November 21st meeting, and that was following a public hearing. They unanimously recommended approval of the amendment. And the amendment is amendment number 5 in the staff report that you received. And you also can find the proposed changes to the B2 zoning district in agenda item 5.1, which involves the first reading of an ordinance, if you should so decide to proceed with this matter. This request originally came to the Planning Commission in the form of a letter from an owner of property in the downtown area, who the property is right across the street from here, where he was having difficulty leasing space for commercial purposes, and inquired if it would be possible to put a residential property on part of the first floor. We informed him that in the B2 zoning district, residential uses are not permitted. So he sent us a letter and asked if the Planning Commission could consider this matter. And so the Planning Commission has gone through a process of evaluating this request, and you have their recommendation. Staff and the commission kind of narrowed the area where we were going to consider allowing residential uses to just the downtown area. And if you look at a map, zoning map of the downtown area, what you will note is that we have a B1 zone in which we allow residential units, and that's in the lighter shaded area. John, maybe you can point to where those B1 zones are. There's another one over in the corner. And then we allow residential uses in the B3 zoning district, which is the red shaded area. And surrounding the downtown area and also kind of within it, we have R3 uses, so that's housing uses. And then we have B2 zoned areas, and we don't allow residential uses in those areas. And so that was kind of the impetus for also proceeding with this matter. Now, within the downtown area, there are 4 half blocks that are zoned B2, and there are 2 partial half blocks that are zoned B2. So we're not talking about a large land area. In your report, we identified research that we have done on B2 zoning districts in the downtown area. And what we found is that there currently are 9 dwelling units in that area. Those are grandfathered in. 5 of them are 4 of them are single family, and 5 of them are apartments. In the entire B2 zoning area in the downtown, we have 28 parcels. And on those 28 parcels, if you look at the land uses, 17 are permitted uses in the B2 zoning district, and 19 are permitted uses in the B3 zoning district. So our analysis shows that most of the existing uses in the B2 are also permitted in the B3. And so in essence, what we have in the downtown area really is one zoning district. You know, at one time it was very different, but over the years, you know, it's kind of become just one land use, a similar land use area. One of the things that we also did is we took a look at the, potential residential development that could take place in the B2 area. And this is a staff assessment and staff opinion. And what we found of these 6 locations is one that had strong potential for residential development, 2 that had some potential, 1 that had limited potential, and then 2 that we thought didn't have any potential at all. So we're not talking about a significant amount of residential development. We also looked at other communities and what they did is from a zoning standpoint. We looked at 11 greater Minnesota cities, and those are listed in the report. And what we found is of those 11 cities, 9 of them had similar zoning districts to our B2 district. And of those 9 cities with similar districts, 7 of them allowed apartment units in that zoning district, and 7 of them allowed multifamily in that zoning district. And so, with 2 exceptions, all of the cities researched allow some type of residential development in zoning districts similar to our B2. And so those uses, could be multifamily, they could be mixed-use buildings, or they could be apartment dwellings above the first floor. That tended to vary. Third thing that we looked at was the city's comprehensive plan. And what the plan did, and the information is provided in your agenda packet, is it established what is called the downtown district. And the reason that this designation was used was kind of a recognition that the central business district is changing. You know, at one time it was the commercial hub of the city. It was our retail center. And as we all know, that's no longer the case. And so when we did the comprehensive plan, I think there was kind of an understanding that the downtown area is going to change, and it's probably going to become a combination of uses. And so that could be commercial, it could be residential, it could be civic, it could be office, you know, a whole lot of different things. And one of the goals of our land use plan was, and I just want to read it verbatim, is to encourage the continuing evolution of the downtown to a vital and sustainable mixture of commercial, residential, and civic uses. So I think the idea was that we were going to integrate more residential units into our downtown area. And so I think this proposed action is consistent with what our comprehensive plan would recommend. The other thing I would note is that we are recommending that this use be allowed only with a conditional use permit. So there's a public hearing process that is required, and so there is notification that is provided to area property owners, an opportunity for input and comment on the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave?
I think they did a very thorough job and very thorough investigation of how it should go.
I serve on the planning commission, and yes, you know, we had this two times brought to us, and we requested information from other cities for more feedback. You know, I still have some concerns about whether it's being driven by developers, you know, redeveloping it, or is it, you know, because there's more demand for residential units than for business uses, you know, and once it's gone, you know, but it is by conditional use permit, you know, so there will be public hearings, but, you know, I've had some calls that are concerns about parking needs too, you know, because once, you know, we start chipping away and we backfill these lots potentially, but we have to look at that seriously when we go with a conditional use permit moving forward. Just some thoughts.
Any other questions?
My name is
Yeah, go
John,
ahead.
pardon me?
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is John Covington. I own property at 106 South Minnesota Street. So we have property in the section, this area right here. My biggest concern of being able to grant the amendment here is traffic in the alleys. Right now in this particular block, we already have a tremendous amount. We have a heating and air business. We have a chiropractor business. We have a accounting business. We now have a new construction that is proposing to put a couple of residential units in, possibly using parking in the alley. There is a parking lot next to the insurance agency. Across the street, across the alley, there is an apartment complex that has access to the alley. There's my business. We have 3 stalls that go in and out of the alley. There's the Thrivent business. They have several cars, I would, you know, maybe 4, possibly 5 cars coming in and out of there. Next to that is a empty lot, which is potential for residential development, and they would be using the alley. There is a residence there now. Their garage is right on the alley. They go in and out of there on a daily basis. And then there is another building on the corner where they use it on a limited basis with trailers and things of that nature. The problem on Minnesota Street is there's only 2-hour parking in front on the Minnesota Street side. So we pretty much always have to use the rear entrances through the alley. If we allow this amendment to take place in this area, there's a potential for a lot more traffic. Recently, the church was just purchased on the corner, and they haven't mentioned anything about residential units, but there could be a potential there. Like I said, there's already new construction that has been developed or been started that is proposing. So I really think we need to evaluate the use of this area. There's possible wear and tear on, a lot more wear and tear on the alley. Of course, the property owners are eventually responsible for, maintaining of that. There's snow removal issues. Where are we going to go with all our snow? I realize at this point the city does plow that, but I'm not sure if they remove the snow or not, or if they simply are plowing it into the back lots. I do know that whenever I blow snow, there's quite a windrow there to move. So I really wish we would maybe reconsider this area. I do also feel that with this new construction, some of it may be being pushed to be passed because they've already got it started. And we need to, I think, step back and take a look at this particular area. That's my main concern, is the congestion of the parking area. What I see happening already downtown, we have a concern of parking. There's a lot of potential to develop apartment units above the downtown buildings, but it's pretty much economically not viable because of the amount of capital to invest to make them worthy of renting. Then there's no parking to offer to the tenants. So we already have a congestion of parking downtown, and I really hate to see it continue to develop in at least this surrounding area. That's basically my concern.
Thank you.
That was going to be my issue as well, so thank you, Mr. Covington. It was the parking issue of concern for me as well. That anytime we start adding housing units, you got to start adding places to park. And as you already stated, we have issues downtown all over for parking. It is a conditional use permit, so we could look at each one case by case. I'm not a fan personally of pulling up to a business and there's a residence right there on the downtown. I just don't know if I know we approved the one that's in the middle of a business, but it's not on the front of the residence on Center Street. There's a business and then there's the residence. That I can live with a little bit better, but I don't know.
I had actually asked that further question, and I believe Mr. Schnobrecht's going to answer it right now.
Okay. Well, first off, the intent was that the residential units will be, if they're allowed on the first floor, there are certain size limitations, and there are certain locations that we want them in the rear of the building. Secondly,
Would this though, Dave, allow them to have it in the front if it got passed?
no.
Okay, all right, I want to make clear that.
No, it was the intent that the residential areas would be in the back part of the
Right.
building.
Good.
The second thing is that the ordinance does establish parking requirements based on the number of units. So we're going to make sure that people are parking off-street and will not be parking on-street or in other locations.
And one other question I had asked the city planner, and in my mind, okay, right now it's a commercial alley. Or if I think about it, if you put residential use in, does it soften the use? I rarely hear heavy traffic in our residential area. That was a question I had asked him. Right now, it is heavy use with the businesses that are there. I get one side, it might be more use, but I also get, will it be a softened use? Person goes home at night, leaves in the morning, they're not there the rest of the day. I don't know.
Right, because a business could come in and put something that could be even more traffic than a
Correct.
residential.
I mean, we could have no say in it in a B2. The right business comes in, 15 trucks pull in and out, service trucks every day.
Well, yeah, that was a concern
Yeah.
brought up, too, in planning and commission is, the use, the activity, the business could change use too. So, and then you've got houses next door, and so are those people to adapt to the new surroundings, because you put residential into the B2. And just to chime in on Dave, you just said that residential would be in the rear of the properties. But
Yeah.
the property across the street, we were asked to put next to the front, which faces Broadway, not
No.
on that
No.
particular building.
Mr. Riki's here, and if you wanted to ask him, he could tell you that his plans were to put it in the rear of the building.
Okay. I was maybe misunderstanding it because there was the other storefront is next to the main building.
It is technically to the side of the building, but there is also space that kind of buffers from the storefront that is there to the space I would like to use. I do not want anything in the front of that building. As far as, I don't want that to look like a living space and be an eyesore to the community and stuff like that. So I definitely understand, that the property doesn't need to be visible to the traffic and community.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Just maybe more so a comment. We kind of went through this with the B3 we've allowed, where we allowed the residential
Right.
into those buildings. I don't know how this would be much different. It's just basically expanding it. So, I understand we've covered ourselves for parking. We've got that all built in. We have certain requirements, and we have requirements for as far as the front part of the building or the street facing main floor, as far as business. So
Yeah,
See where it fits
the
real
ordinance
nice.
does establish minimum square footages to be maintained for business purposes, and then minimum square footages for residential as well. So,
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? If not, entertain a motion?
I'll offer a motion approving the recommendation of the Planning Commission to allow residential uses in the B2 Service Business Zoning District and proceed with the first consideration of ordinance number 19-035.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 4.1, proposed Newham Fire Department bylaw changes. Chris? You good? Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, council members. Again, Tyler Zollner, President of the Newham Fire Department. Back to present the proposed bylaw changes from our October meeting that we voted on and tabled at the last meeting. In your agenda packets, there was a redlined version of the bylaws included this time at your all request. Here for questions, comments.
Yeah, I'm going to put my 2 cents in for it, being I'm a past volunteer firefighter. I've looked at tons of data the last couple of days, percentages of different departments. We could beat this thing to death if we want to keep ordering the chief of the department to come back to us. I guess giving it a try, I'm going to respect the department's vote. The majority was 28-11. The department voted on it. Let's give it a try. If we run into an issue, it's not working, then we come back. That's my take on it, because we could tell them to come back with thousands of pages of data from different departments. The League of Minnesota Cities, which, by the way, I did want to add in, the League of Minnesota Cities highly recommends we get rid of bylaws. I did find that out, yes, in volunteer departments. I was really surprised at that. Don't want to go that route, But my take is that, okay, the fire department voted on it, let's move forward with it.
I guess I have a take on this also, and I've taken several calls on it, and I think it falls a little short for our fire department as a whole. I think I think the percentages are fine. I think removing a lot of the exceptions, the one that I think needs to stay is their primary employment. That they should be excused if they're at their primary employment and they can't leave, or I think that a lot of the people that are on the fire department were hired that way, if you're or taken on with that, and there's a lot of long-term fire department or firefighters that have worked under that structure, and I think when I looked at the percentages that were sent out as far as how many that might affect, I think that there's quite a few. I think it's going to be more than the 3 or 4 if we move to this. So I guess, I know that they took a vote and that, it passed, but I think it comes to us for review, and I think there is some strong feelings there that there's going to be quite a few people that are affected by this. And I think, from what I heard, is their main concern is that if you're at your primary job, because some people work out of town, and we've taken them on the fire department for that. I just know, as my husband was an ex-firefighter, and he worked a job the first how many year or so before he was, he couldn't leave. He worked in a place where he couldn't leave. And so I don't know. I think primary employment should be an exception. I guess that's kind of the short and sweet of it. I can go along with everything else, but
I have somewhat of the same feelings, and I haven't really changed my mind since our last meeting. I don't think that we can approve this and see how it goes, because what the problem is we're going to lose firefighters. And 2 years ago, we were begging for firefighters, and we were almost at a real serious loss at that point. And we know passing this, we're going to lose firefighters. I can't agree to that, and I won't. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better plan, a way of maybe incentivizing the people that do show up, and maybe penalties for those that don't. There just got to be something better out there, and I don't think this is the right way to go. So I'm not going to support it.
I would like to support it, but, I would be comfortable amending it, with allowing for the workplace, for people's jobs.
That is my primary concern, is
Correct.
that particular area, yes.
Well, I agree with you guys. I think we have to, because it is a voluntary thing. Everybody does have a job, and everybody can't get away. And, there's circumstances where maybe one day they can and the next day they can't. So I think that's something that the chief could work out and work with the people that's an exception. Because somebody could work out of town, we'll use an example in Mankato or whatever, and they get a fire call, they take off, they start heading to Walm to get halfway here, but all of a sudden the fire call is canceled, or maybe by the time they get here it's out or whatever, but they still have to come in here and sign in as they came in, and they shouldn't have to. I think if they're notified and they're 2 miles out of Mankato, turn around and go back to work.
One comment I do want to make, I apologize. My computer's not working. Counselor Schultz's is not working. I wanted to read something from the bylaw.
Counselor, I don't know if this is what you were looking at. One thing I think the council needs to be aware of, the bylaws state in Article 5, Section 1, amendments to the Constitution, which I think would be these bylaws, may be made at any regular meeting by a majority vote of the members present, notice of the amendment having been given in writing. At a previous regular meeting, all such amendments are subject to approval by the city council. So as a matter of procedure, I think any amendments need to come from the members.
right.
And if they would agree to present these amendments with the type of language that has been mentioned, then the council could approve it. But I don't think that the council can make the changes
Right.
and impose them on the organization.
Right, we would just have to say that
Send
we
it back.
don't
You
send
won't
it
ac-
back and they have to, but that's our main concern that's my main concern.
Now, this would
when
be an
looking
up or
at it.
down vote, but if the council felt that you could pass it with that kind of language, then it would be up to the organization if they wanted to consider that.
In my mind, I just don't want to play ring around the rosy. Comes back to us, okay, 33 members voted, 9 didn't. Well, we're not going to lose 9 firefighters. Where do we stop? That's the point I'm getting. Where do we stop?
I agree.
I mean,
I agree with that, but
is 33 votes to 8 good enough? Now we'll pass it? We're going to lose 8 firefighters? I don't have the answer, but
And I will say that daytime calls are not the issue. So people working during the day, that's not the problem that we face. It's the weekends, it's the nights, and those calls when it's cold outside, and it's a lot of those calls that we're falling short. The daytime is not an issue, So if you're working during the day, that's not where we're seeing the lapse. It's the evenings and the nights and the weekends that we're seeing the lapse in people showing up.
right.
But some people do work 3 rotating shifts and weekends and are on call, with their jobs, too. So I think we have to work with people because it's still volunteer, we're compensating them well. I feel, if there's a fire call, they'll make every effort to be out and go out.
And we don't want restrictions that'll prevent future firefighters from joining. I can't join because these rules are too strict, and I just think there's some more common ground here that we just haven't found yet.
I agree there's got to be a balance, and I understand it gets hard to monitor their percentages if you've got a gazillion exceptions, like, a family event or, I really do like the whole family first, but does it really work when you're working with a percentage? Because everybody can have a good excuse, and how do you allow one excuse and not the other? You don't want to be that judge. But I think primary work, it's your primary day job, or if you work shifts, your shift job, that should be the one exception. And then if somebody falls below their percentage and they want to appeal it, then there's the board that they can go to. And, if there's extenuating circumstance with family, sick children, sick family, or, extended leave, then it's dealt that way. So I guess, that's.
and again, one of those pieces is covered in the bylaw about the chiefs with extenuating circumstances. I apologize again, throw this thing out the window, but
Looking at the new language or the old?
it's old language, it stays in there.
Yeah.
I haven't
This is what they were using.
Okay. If you go to that item E, a review board of the fire chief and assistant chiefs reserves the right to excuse firefighters due to extenuating circumstances. That has been in there for years. I was an assistant chief on that committee. There are times you had to bring somebody in. What's going on? Your percentage is getting low. I do understand that if a guy's on shift work, he misses drill, well, he's not going to take off a day of vacation to go to drill or whatnot. But I believe with the staff and the fire department that, okay, the chiefs get together, it's in the bylaw. Okay, it is an extenuating circumstance. Some of the excuses I have heard about and been emailed, I disagree with.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I disagree with them. I won't accept that. I missed many a basketball game, meals, and whatnot. I won't accept that. If your purpose is to be a firefighter and you want to join, you'll make every effort to do that 50%. You'll make every effort to make the 70%. And in my mind, now I'm speaking as a firefighter, not a counselor, then it's time to make ways. Time to go. You can't serve the organization. You can't serve the general public. The rules are at the top of the bylaw, what they're here for, to fight fire, protect, and serve. If you only want to do that 30% of the time, I don't think you're doing the city justice. That's my take.
And you're sticking to it.
I'm sticking to it.
Good.
Paul, you have some?
President Schmitz, councilors, the reason that we pulled the excuses out of there is when I got this letter from the state auditor's office, I called up there to find out exactly what they're looking for and what some of their best practices are. And one of the first things she told me was get rid of the excuses. And I think even no matter what department we looked at, They don't have excuses. They came up with a percentage, and they went with that. So that's why this was. We proposed this, I got this in the first of the year, and we proposed this back in March. We brought it on the floor. I think the Relief Association probably talked about it a month ahead of time, but we brought it on the floor March 1st, and we asked for suggestions and, you know, all that. And for 7 months, they hashed it out. We went through a number of scenarios, and this is what was compromised when we finished. So just the history of it, that's how we came up with this. I guess, you know, when if you're going to use work for an excuse, okay, how many hours do you give them for their primary work? If, you know, when does it get, at what percentage point does it get to the point where it's detrimental to the fire department? And I think we always looked in the past, if you look at the old percentages and stuff like that, you know, always hovered right around there, around 30 or 50%. So that's why the 50% is there. And that's where we came up with that. I mean, we didn't just pull these numbers out of the air. I think if you look at those percentages of all the firefighters, I think 50%. I think 50% is doable. But that's where we came up with it. So.
Paul, the new rules still allow for you, and how many assistant chiefs do we have?
Two.
So you still 3 of you that can still excuse firefighters. So do you see that as you 3 agreeing together on an excuse, or each individually?
Oh, I would think we would be able to agree. All 3 of us would be able to agree on something. And that was another one of the practices. It used to be just the chief had that discretion. Right. It was listed in there. And that was one of the best practices. They also suggested from the auditor's office that you make it either 2 or 3 people, whatever you want, whether it's the chief or an HR or a chief and an assistant chief. That way it doesn't look like you're playing precedence or preference to one person or another.
Yep. One person's more weaker than the
yeah,
other.
Yeah. You know, we have a guy that's in the National Guard, and he's gone for 1 month, and then he's gone for 2 weeks. So we take that into consideration. You know, those things happen. We understand that. I think if we put an excuse in there, then, you know, of course, like I said, then, okay, how much do we give them? You know, and primary, you know, what's considered their primary? Some guys have 2 part-time jobs. Okay, you know, which one do we go with? And like I said before, when it gets to the point where, what percentage does it get that they're gone, does it get to the point where it's detrimental to the fire department?
So what you're saying, Paul, work has never been a major problem?
I think when guys actually, you know, spent too much time out of town, most of the time they saw it themselves that they weren't doing justice to the fire department. We just had 2 guys that, I think I brought it up the last time, that one works out of Minneapolis, and he saw he wasn't doing justice to the department. Another guy found a job in Northfield where he was doing like 3 or 4 12-hour shifts in a row, and realized he wasn't going to be able to make the training and that stuff.
You know, I'm going to back up again to that ending statement, section 22. The department will, at their meeting, will change it by a simple majority vote of the members present. That's what they did. 6-7 months of it. A simple majority vote, 28-11, 2/3 of the vote. If they choose to shoot it down tonight, then I want to know what vote it takes from the fire department. Am I still allowed to vote being in the relief?
Yes.
I mean, that's my take on it.
The only thing go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can appreciate both sides. I really can. And I know it makes it hard when you put exceptions in, but there's always an exception. There will always be an exception. And I think, I've heard loud and clear from many that work is the issue here. I don't think it's any of the other exceptions. I don't think it's their second job. I don't think it's their basketball games or kids' activities. I think everybody understands that, you know, that's a choice you make. But, yeah.
I disagree with that. 'Cause I don't want to hear an excuse that 3 o'clock in the morning you don't get up for a fire call because you got to leave for work at 6, and you're going to tell me it's a safety issue. Counselor Fisher, I've been through this stuff with firefighters, 21 years of it, as a chief.
Well, it's when they're at their primary job. I
And
mean,
we
they're
never
at-
had an issue when it was the
Yep.
primary job. I know that's a man's bread and butter. I know he's working a day shift or he's on rotating shifts. He's going to miss it. That's his primary job. It never was an issue. I don't believe it'll be an issue with this. I'm just saying now we're going against the bylaws of the department, which we approved, the simple majority vote. Well, that's not good enough. I want something else.
Well, the bylaws are there to vote, and they're to bring it to us to
Right.
approve. You know, we still have the final approval. So I appreciate that they took a vote, but I think there's a high number that we're concerned enough that it's going to affect them from being on the fire department or leaving with a bad mark on their name because they can't make their percentage, and longtime fire department members. So I guess I want to be fair to when we change something like this so drastically, and I think it is a drastic change because you're taking away any exception, and we hired them under the past bylaws, and some of them have lived by those bylaws for 20 years and made percentages. So I guess like I said, I can appreciate both ways, but I really feel that there
In my mind, you're telling me then let's leave it the same. It was working the way they were doing it with the
Well,
70%.
I guess,
That-
I don't know, maybe it was working, maybe it was,
No.
but it sounds like
Then why do
there's-
these members of the department want to go to 50 if it was working at 70%?
because of the letter, I believe, is what prompted the
Yeah.
beginning, right, Paul, is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that what prompted?
The letter did prompt it, but it was time to clean it up. Like I said, they, you know, when you look at the other departments, they don't have the excuses, and I guess that's what I was trying to get rid of.
And I
'cause
can
it's-
appreciate that. I mean, it gets to be such gray areas, and I know that's what you're trying to eliminate, is some of those gray areas. But I think primary job, when you're on the job, your primary job, I don't think that's too hard to delineate from a part-time job or and it may take some extra work, or you might need the help of your captains and your leads to track, but.
Would it be that hard to forego if they're at work? I mean, is that something we could just add in it and make it simple? I mean, I agree with Lisa. I don't think anybody
You know,
should.
and we can do that, but then I don't think we should leave it at 50%. Then we need to take it back up to 70% and give the excuse for work. You know, I can live with that. I mean, we're going to have to.
Something you can take back to to your group.
I'll
and
certainly
talk-
try. You know, and I can. You know, I'm going to need their cooperation as well. You know, we're trying to set up a new system for tracking when people are not available.
Right. But I guess on the other hand, I side with Dave. Do we really want to keep toting this dang thing around, or do we just want to settle it? Can we as a city council say this is the way it is, you take it back and tell them that's it?
Well, I've been at this since March already.
I know, but we could just
I
keep
agree.
throwing it back and forth every month.
But we have enough concern as a council,
Right.
that I don't know if there's consensus to pass this tonight or not. Find out by a vote, I would assume, pretty quick.
I guess
Or we
yeah.
can kick it back and say, wrestle with it one more time. I don't know. I'm not gonna support it the way it's written now, but that's just my vote, but.
No, I guess I don't support it exactly that way either. I would if
I'm
they just had a
close.
clause in there for your primary job. It takes preference. I mean, it has to.
Right, but and then in my mind, then why are you here if we add that in there, and we're still going to lower 20% of the calls?
I know.
Well, are you really lowering it that much because it was an overall before, correct? It was an overall, it was a
The
combination.
70%.
No, 70% and 70%.
Yeah, but the 70% included work, and now we're just saying you're gonna make at least 50
No,
in your job.
no,
No.
It was calculated, the work excuses were excused. That wasn't included in the,
Right.
No, not in your vote, it wasn't.
no.
But I'm saying we could throw it in and say this is what we would agree on, right?
So, I want to clarify, when you do their total, the way it currently is, your 70%, do you take all calls and all training, lump it into one total and take 70% of that?
Well, here's what happens is we take their percentage. Okay, let's say it's at 62% for the 6 months. Then we look at their excused absences and we add that in there. If it gets over 70%, then there.
Right. But what constitutes, is it a call and training? Is that total? 70% a total of all training and
Correct.
calls? So
Correct.
it's one lump sum.
Yes.
If we made, made a motion to table this again, what do you think would happen, Paul, if you brought this back to your fighters?
Well, you might not hear from us again until I don't know when. I really don't. We can work with the clause, but, I don't think we can have 50% and then allow.
I agree with you. I think these numbers are gonna have to change with that.
I think they are too.
I'd like to see what that would look like.
The training, I'm not going to give on, I wouldn't give on the training. I think we need to keep that up there. I think if you're going to give excuses for, my opinion, I think if you're going to give excuses for work, then you're going to have to keep it in that 60 to 70% range. But there's like Lisa said, there's a lot of gray areas here. I've got guys that are self-employed. How many hours do we give them? And at what percentage is that detrimental to the fire department? I've got things now where the we have work. Okay, let's say the guy leaves work for a week, comes back, and he goes to a ball tournament on the weekend. All that is excused, and I don't see him for 2 weeks. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. I get complaints from the company officers, why is this guy, why is he, well, he's meeting the criteria of being excused. So I think it's a little not quite as simple. When you start adding excuses in there, then you start adding a bunch of these gray areas. And like I said, I'm not opposed to having it in there, but then we're also going to need some guidelines. If I have the authority to give them leeway, then I should also have the authority to say, hey, okay, now you're down below 60%. This is my cutoff.
I think at the end of the day, we as a council aren't here to micromanage the fire department. We've got a chief in place, and they've got recommendations. They've talked about it long enough. There's a clause in there where they can review by case. Yet too, whether it's, their job or, the issues. And if he knows who's working rotating shifts or working out of town or the cases, it's going to be a case-by-case issue. And you have to have some groundwork. You need to know at the end of the day you're going to have a team that's going to be there to fight the fire. I mean, if you got a car fire, do you need extra units? I don't know. And you need the manpower, so you need some sort of checks and balance. How we harness that yet, I just don't.
I have a real hard time with the black and white rule because nothing is ever black and white. And,
Well, it isn't really, I agree with you, it isn't really black and
And
white,
he's-
though. They still have a right, they got
Sure.
chiefs and assistant chief, they can sit down and talk about it and whatever, and work out something if somebody is not meeting the standard, but I guess, on the other hand, I agree with Dave, I mean, and what Larry just said.
But then you're
We have a
getting,
fire department, it ain't ours to micromanage it. They decided this is what they want, they brought it to us, they want the 50%, they voted on it, said and done. Give it a shot.
but then you're back to allowing 3 people.
I know.
You're back to allowing that gray area. So now you're still putting it back on Paul because.
But not as
then-
bad.
Well, you don't know how many people this way is gonna affect either.
Right.
Or do we have HR get involved, you know? And that if they feel it need, be, if the 3 of them met. I'm not trying to make more paperwork out of it either, but.
And it does, you say we shouldn't be micromanaging, but we heard the last time that we know that at least 4 firefighters are gonna probably drop. I've heard many more than that. Now we have a third of our fire department walking out the door, and now we do have an issue that's gonna be right in front of us. So I think we have to take,
I think this idea of, just quitting because we changed the percentage, I think that's a little premature. If they're gonna walk out just because we changed the percentage without even trying it, I mean,
well, the calls we get, some have already determined based on their jobs that they can't make the percentage. There's just no way.
I think some of them have known about it long enough that they've tracked
Yeah.
some of their, their calls, since you guys started it, and I think people know that they're not gonna be able to make it.
But then you still got the review board. I just,
I
I got a hard time believing, Paul, that you're gonna kick somebody out because they just couldn't leave. the job.
we've talked about a million different scenarios. I've talked about it with Chris, and you're gonna have, I'm sure sooner or later there's gonna be a month that's gonna come up where you have a bunch of daytime calls, and a lot of these guys, won't be able to make it. Okay, so at the end of the 6 months, we throw that month out the window because it's it's an oddity. If we have that authority,
Which you would.
But then you're back to throwing it out for some, and then the next guy, you're back to the same thing. You're back to the same thing, allowing, I'm gonna throw this one out, it's judgment calls. It's like, we had so many this time, but when we have one short of that, and somebody doesn't make it, how are you gonna say, well, this time I'm not gonna throw them out, because,
So I got a question for the whole council. I'm gonna ask it. So what's our number when you get the number of calls from firefighters? 3 of them. I can't do this, I quit. Not good enough, we gotta change it. What's the number? That's what I wanna know. What number do you wanna accept then, as a council?
I don't have.
4 guys are gonna quit, 10 are gonna quit?
I haven't had anybody call and say they're gonna quit.
I haven't received that.
That's what I'm getting to. One individual was contacted through a backdoor method, which I have a hard time with as a retired firefighter, but we'll touch that on a later basis. I just want to know what council wants.
I guess what I want is I would like to see the one exception of primary work. That's what I
And
want to
I
see.
agree with you, Councilor Fisher, but then I'm not going to accept, and we lowered it 20% for fire calls.
Well, I think the overall 70% had been working. The overall, are you gonna require 70% fire calls and 70%, and 70% training? That's 2 different things. If you have 70% overall, you can be really high on your training and lower on your calls. So, and that's the way it is now.
if we're gonna keep 70%, then we'll keep 70% across the board.
Right, all in one lump total.
That would be my preference. If that's where you want to keep it, at 70%.
And remove all exceptions except, primary work.
Right.
Take some of the gray area out of it.
Because that's what you're hearing,
Yeah.
is I guess I'd support leaving it at the 70% and just make the change exception for work.
I guess I would support that. I would support if they came back with 60% on the calls and 70% of the training. I think that there's other percentages, and that's for them to decide what they can accommodate, the firemen. My concern is that exception of work.
Question for the chief, will that affect our audit a lot or not? I know they want us to get rid of excuses, but
You know, I don't know, I don't think it'll affect the audit, I mean, from the state auditor's office. I just, that's what they advised us to do,
Yeah.
is to get rid of those.
But you really would get no lot of excuses except for one. Work takes priority, that's all.
Mr. President, I'm kind of keeping an eye on our clock too, because we are scheduled to have a Truth and Taxation meeting starting at 6. So I think we need to do something with this issue and move forward, or table it, or whatever.
And I'm open to, like, you know, a trial. I mean, you know, if we do implement something, you know, I don't know if they can do something on a trial or track it or.
but the chief still has to take it back to the department through the
Absolutely.
bylaw.
Yeah.
And then come back. I don't have a problem with that either, what the work is. I realize that's a general or a family's bread and butter.
So I'm going to make a motion to kind of kick it back one more time and see if they can work out something where the primary job is an exception.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
I think if that alters your other percentages, bring that back to us as well.
Yeah.
So,
But I think that's the only exception we want is work.
yes.
So
Yep.
just so they know it. All right, with no more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for putting up with us.
Yeah.
All right. Item 5.1, first consideration of ordinance number 19-035.
Mr.
Roger.
President, since the charter was amended, we no longer need to read this, considering the time constraints that have been mentioned. The terms were discussed by Mr. Schnobrick. I don't know if you have any questions about the language. Generally, the new ordinance would require off-street parking of at least 1.5 parking stalls per unit, per dwelling unit. It also would require that the residential area not face the front of the building. And one of the things we talked about when we were putting this language together is it's not always easy to determine what the front of the building is. It kind of depends on if it's on a corner, but that would be sort of on a case-by-case basis, and staff would give you its opinion.
Okay,
Thank you. So, we can go on to item 5.2, Emerald Ash Borer response grants.
John, I'll take this one.
Okay.
So a while ago, we had brought before you that we were being quarantined for emerald ash borer, and 2 grants had come up, and I had given staff permission to apply for those grants because of the accelerated timeline. So we wanted to bring those to you just for your information on the 2 grants that we are applying for. This by no means you have to accept the money if we do get them. It was just the accelerated timeline that we needed to get our applications in. So the first grant is preparing for the emerald ash borer in the community forest, and this is up to $100,000. And there's a 25% in-kind or cash match. With that grant, we will be using $70,000 for tree removal and $30,000 for replanting. The in-kind services that we would be using for this would be staff time inspecting and selecting trees for removal, staff or street department staff time for grinding the stumps, and staff time for grant administration. Cash match will be through the Tree Commission's existing fund. The other grant that we would be looking at is the Emerald Ash Borer Community First Response Tree Planting, and that's up to $30,000, again with a 25% match. We'd be looking to replant between 125 and 200 trees. And the in-kind match for this would again be through staff time and the annual inspections as trees planted and grant administration. So there would be no impact to the budget if we were to be awarded these grants.
I know we're really short on time, but I know this is gonna be a huge expense to our city in the next 5 years. 'Cause basically, we're talking about all these trees having to come down in our city at some point. So are we talking about maybe purchasing tree equipment and versus contracting out at all? I mean, we maybe talk about that another time, but
So realistically, for the tree removal, that is for full tree removal. So we're gonna tag
contract, have somebody do it or us do it?
have someone come out and do it. So again, we'll have contractors, and we might go out to RFP and look at having one selected. So then it's not, oh, we're gonna charge you X for this tree. It's one consistent
Okay.
price for the
So
tree.
we're targeting boulevard trees now,
Mhm.
park trees probably second, or I'm sure there's some
Yeah,
plan.
we'll look at areas throughout. You know, it'll probably be a combination because some in the boulevard may not be as bad as some in the park, and you want to really get rid of the bad trees first, and then slowly work your way down.
It would be nice maybe to have an update on what that plan might look like at some point.
Yeah, we can do that.
Information on that.
We're looking to see if we can get the grant because that's really going to kind of dictate what that plan is. Because outside of that, we haven't really budgeted anything.
Right, and
for
we're gonna
tree
need a
removal.
plan,
And
Yeah.
so.
So do you, for the minutes, need to approve that we as council approve this? I know you pre-approved it, but do you, for the official record, do you need a motion to approve that application of the grant?
John, did we need a resolution for those applications? No.
Do you
No,
think we're
just
okay?
when-
All right.
Not
Yeah,
till the
alright,
funds
just
are
checking.
received.
When received, then you'll have to accept the funds.
I did just want to note one thing as far as the plan goes. We do have a set of priorities. Number one being taking down those trees that already are confirmed emerald ash borer, because those are going to fall over within a couple of years. And then number two, taking down those trees that would cause the most safety concern or in really high traffic locations. So we're working with both the street department, the engineering department to identify those things.
Great, makes sense, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, we'll go, let me get back on here again. We'll go to item number 6.1, reported claims paid. Accept a list of claims paid in the amount of $1,862,964.25 and a list of claims to be paid in the amount of $1,276,847.28.
Approve, or make a motion to approve.
Second.
We got a motion to second to approve. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, we'll adjourn to a closed session.
You got an addendum.
You wanna do the-
Oh, we got an
do the
addendum,
addendum?
that's right.
I'll offer a motion to suspend the rules to take on the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. The addendum is public hearing on the 2020 annual city budget.
No,
No,
that ain't it.
the
No,
the
got the
addendum
wrong
has
order.
to
Go
do
for it.
with a request for the
Oh,
subordination of a
subordinate,
loan.
okay. I grabbed the wrong one.
And what I'd like to do is
Go
just
ahead.
maybe have Mark Peterson come up from United Prairie Bank to give an explanation about this.
9-minute
particular-
explanation.
Less than 9.
We'll make it more brief than that. Good evening, councilors, President Schmitz. What this is, back in 2013, the city provided a loan to United Commercial Upholstery, which is the property owner is actually PC Properties. And we're asking for the city to now do a subordination as we're providing additional funding for that. And that's the request before you. I think you received a letter in your amended packet.
Yes.
So I'd open it up for questions if you have any questions for me.
And my recommendation for this it would be to approve this. They really only owe about $65,000, and they're looking to invest $1.4 million in the community and create about 8 to 10 jobs by 2020. So subordinating 65,000 is a small drop in the bucket to get that size of investment in the community.
Do you want to explain to the public what subordinating means? I think a lot of them might not know what that means to us.
So basically, in the chance that there is a default, we would be second in line to be paid.
Right.
And, Mr. President, we are currently second in line.
Yeah.
Oh, so
And
we,
there's an existing mortgage of about 1.3 million ahead of the cities. And so if there was a total default, we'd still be behind that.
Sure.
I think what the business owner wants to do is to borrow some more funds to expand or
Correct.
do whatever he's gonna do to hire, add the new job.
Needs to do some renovations to the property.
So we're just agreeing that this new mortgage would come ahead of us,
Yeah.
which the existing one already does, so.
And then,
Thank you.
and then the current property value, you know, their appraised market value is 1.8, so it should be okay.
And we've done this before, and I think the bank is certainly supporting this.
Correct.
I'm gonna offer the motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried.
Mr. President, one last, I'm sorry I didn't catch this as you were doing that. My suggestion would be if you could consider this by resolution, and I realize
Sure.
it was set up for motion, but in the event we would need to record anything, I don't think we will, but I would ask that you please do it that way.
I'll offer the resolution then.
Second.
We have a motion and a second off the resolution. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor? Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll adjourn to go into a closed session. Think you can do that in 7 minutes?
Definitely
Can we
can.
do that?
Sean is ready to roll.
We can definitely do that.
Clear the council chambers.